Spotlight On is brought to you by Light, the technology platform reimagining e-commerce for live events. You can learn more about Light at light.com/partnerships. That is lyte.com/partnerships.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight On. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. This week, the spotlight shines on violinist Marissa Licata. I recently caught Marissa in concert here in Seattle, where I was struck not only by her musicianship, but her theatricality and her diverse repertoire, which spanned Eastern European, Afro-Cuban, American jazz, and much more. With her conservatory training, Marissa has played with international artists including Jethro Tull, Alicia Keys, Ringo Starr, and many others. Pre-pandemic, she was violinist and concert mistress for the American Repertory Theater production of the Alanis Morissette musical Jagged Little Pill. ART is where she'll be returning this summer, as you'll learn in our talk. Marissa gives us insight into her training, her approach to repertoire, and she tells us a little bit about how the worlds of classical and theatrical performance work. Enjoy our talk. So you made it back to New York safely through the rain and sleet and dark of night?
Yes. So when I was supposed to leave on that Friday, on the, I guess it was the 28th, and yeah, a couple canceled flights, then they rescheduled. Myself and my drummer, we both came from New York for the Royal Room show. And so we came back, we were scheduled to go back on that Friday. That couldn't happen. So we managed to sneak out a couple of tickets out for Sunday. So it wasn't too much of a delay. He and I had a great time. We went to Snoqualmie Falls. We did some other trails and just hung out with friends and family while we were there. So we made use of the extra 2 days.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, it was beautiful out here that weekend. So you lucked out.
It was. There was sun. Actually, yeah, from like that Wednesday on, there was sun every day. So we had a great time and got to enjoy some of the scenes and which we otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah. Well, you're what you just said sort of alludes to a question I had for you, which was I couldn't tell at the show. Was that your full band or was that a pickup band?
So I guess technically it would be a pickup band. My drummer and I, Shannon Ford, we and the story that I told at the show was actually really true. One day we were sitting in New York and we just decided, hey, let's go to Seattle. I have a cousin in Seattle. Let's go visit her. Let's play a show. And there we are. So he and I are from New York, currently working in New York. And the guitarist, Greg Fulton, and bass player, Dave Pascal, are both Seattle locals and very much in the musical theater scene and the band scene. As is Alexandria Henderson, the vocalist we had. And they are friends of Shannon's. So Shannon knew them. Shannon's played with them on different show settings. But for me, it was the first time actually that I met them and played with them in a band type setting. But it's and people ask too, they're like, well, how did you guys rehearse? And with COVID, like how did you, it was hard to be in the same room, and then of course we're not in the same city, and we decided on tunes that we wanted to do, just tunes that we liked, and we're like, let's learn these individually, and let's do a rehearsal before the show. So that's how we do it. And obviously those guys are at such a level that it's, you just trust them. I trust them. I trust Shannon's, I trust his friends on stage. I trust who he knows. And so we, that's how we did it.
That's really incredible. Could you?
And I think that's kind of also, not to cut you off, but I think that's also how rehearsals are now. How the rehearsing has had to be, at least over the past 18 months, just to keep everybody safe and to still be prepared. So figure out new ways.
Did you, how much of the arrangement was known in advance? Like, it's one thing to sort of learn the tune, but then to have an afternoon, I guess, of rehearsal. Like how into it does everybody come prepared for the actual arrangement? And before I let you answer, I will say there were a couple of songs that clearly were either, this is where I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't tell if you guys were playing from an arrangement or if you were a group of people that had played together a lot and were reading each other's cues. Like, I was really trying to figure it out in the moment. It's funny.
Glad I tricked you. No, well, so as far as arrangement goes, that is pretty specific. So what we did was Shannon and I recorded with a bass player out of New York, someone who we've all played with before, and when I did my Birdland debut. So we put together a little group and basically got some reference tracks together for the Seattle band in this case. And when it's another show, we would do the same thing. So the arrangements are quite specific. They are exactly where we want solos, exactly where we've rehearsed when I do an unaccompanied like intro, like I did to start the show, and at different points, it's sort of like, okay, when I play this line, this is where you come in, and that we recorded, and so they had ability to rehearse with that. So the cues and the arrangements are quite specific. That said, the solos are completely whatever we want to do. The length of the solos, even the form of the solos, we did change a few that day, but as far as that's not as big of a deal to change a form here, there. You just have to remember it. This is what we're doing for this show. So that isn't as difficult as making sure that the arrangement is, we want everyone playing such and such at such and such a time. Solos, that's for everybody. That's just free for all. And I remember, and the band and I, we've talked about this because we had it was so exciting for us to play at the Royal Room, and we had such a great time, and we're still talking about it. And the one moment that we really felt like we were all connecting was when Greg, the guitarist, took a solo, and then Shannon said, "Yeah," and you got up in his face, like
I remember that.
In his face, I remember. And so this is something totally in the moment, because I felt like I just could feel it, like he was ready to do something. He was already saying something so important, and it was like, I really want to like bring this to the next level. It's just sort of a moment that you could feel on stage in the moment, and he was ready for it. With another guitarist, someone who is reading his music and getting the arrangement and really playing a perfect show. That's not necessarily the case. I don't necessarily feel like I can do that. But with these guys, and being able to feel them and see them on stage, and that's how it is. It's like, what can I do on stage actually in this moment? And so that was one that we're still talking about. And it was really fun. And it was fun to, get up in his face and kind of go a little bit wild and, make the mistake if that's what was going to happen, Yeah.
It's funny that you point that you select that moment because, again, it translates as an audience member, it translated. There were 2 or 3 times when Greg was soloing that I sort of perceived you really locked into it, or you almost enjoyed it as a recipient of the music, as opposed to just solely being someone else up on stage. Like there were a couple of times where I thought, oh, he's saying something to her right now. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like I said, that doesn't always happen, and it's great when it does. And I wasn't necessarily expecting it, not because they're not great musicians, but because when you don't know them, you don't. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a minute or a show or two or three or a rehearsal or more than an afternoon of rehearsal to feel that connection and feel that trust. For me, it really is about trust. To be able to trust that they can handle it, to be able to trust that, oh, I'm not like actually freaking them out right now and giving them something that's going to just make them nervous, you know? And that's what I was reading. But I knew that, I knew from how my friends talked about Greg and how hearing him and how well prepared he had himself for the rehearsal, I was like, oh, he can handle it. And all I needed to hear and see was that he was willing to, take a solo and, take a chance there.
Yeah. Is that a paradigm that you often tour or perform under? Is it just you and Shannon on the road and you use local people, or like, how does that fit in with your usual way of doing things?
Well, the usual way of doing things now for the past 2 years has been me alone in my room and, imagining what used to be. But in all seriousness, actually, Shannon and I have formed, oddly, over this time of not being able to be in the same room, we have formed a kind of like a core. And I'd say there's a core of the New York people. And there's another person in our bass player in New York who's also part of that core. I think in the future that core, the three of us or the two of us, it also depends on schedules, but that would be how we kind of travel and then see who can, who's there in the cities. It's also fun to, I like that element of improvisation to every show because you don't know these people sometimes, and that's when the real stuff can really come out. Or it doesn't, and you make that a moment too. I believe in making everything its own, its own show. I don't think that there are really any real mistakes with that type of with that mindset of you got great players and you've got maybe some people who are more or less experienced in certain types of music, but you just have to really have willing people to want to do it, and it will be great.
In that kind of a performance environment where you're courting and you're very much interested in the spontaneity and the sort of unique musical stew of that configuration, are there any like bare minimum requirements? In other words, do you want to hit the beats of the arrangement? Do you, is there anything that you say, all right, these are the ground rules that we have to at least stick to? Or is it really like anything goes?
Ground rules would be, let's end together. We don't even have to start together because we can play that off. We can pretend like, oh yeah, it's colors and we meant to do that. Ending together is a big deal. But I'd say that there are a few hits that are in the arrangement that are pretty necessary, almost just as cues for, okay, when are we going to the next section? But a lot of times that takes care of itself on its own because of the arrangement, because, I do send charts for what I have, unless it's, the covers that we did were pretty much from the original version. So those we all just learn, I myself too. I didn't write out a chart for myself. I just learned it from the original recording. The sections kind of flow into each other. If you've learned the melody or you've learned your part to the song or the tune, then we're basically going to be in the same place.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me use, if I may, that particular performance that I saw as a little bit of a jumping off point to some other questions. How is the repertoire that you choose to perform informed by, or what is it reflecting in your musical background and sort of what music you grew up around, what music you were educated in? Like what is your repertoire manifestation of?
It is actually a really good telling of the story of the music that I've been fortunate enough to hear through. I went to school at New England Conservatory, both for undergrad and master's, and I did prep school there as well. I've had a classical music background, up until, we'll say age 18. So 18, 19. So I had 15, 16 years of a classical background. My father is a musician. He plays saxophone. He had me listening to John Coltrane, Ravi Shankar, the klezmer bands, just all different types of music, salsa, whatever was out at the time and what he liked. And he was heavily in jazz, but for me, just the fact that there were all these different types of music really opened my ears to, I don't have to just play Mozart or just play Beethoven, and just because that is technically how I learn. I always knew there was so much music out there. So when I got to, in high school and got to college and beyond, I was just interested in all these other cultures. It helped me learn about cultures. It helped me learn about history of other countries through the music. And I loved it. And I loved learning, seeing the dance that went along with it, the reason for music. And so for me, I put together this show. My shows are just simply tunes that I liked, that I've liked and that I've heard and that made an impact on me in my past. Like, I can say that all of those tunes that we played were tunes that I, when I first heard them, I was like, stopped, and I was like, whoa, okay, so for me, that's a big deal, and I wanted to know more, and I've been fortunate enough to have some really, really amazing people within those folk musics and cultures teach it to me firsthand, and it was anything but a technical or the classical background. So I loved having both the technique, but also the ear part of it. And I really feel like my shows put together everything. My technique, I do like to show that off because I have it and I worked really hard to get it and to be able to play things like Tchaikovsky. And so I weave it in, and I enjoy weaving it in. And I enjoy when publicists and agents or people who try to, who market the show or whatever, they're like, well, we're a little confused as to how do we label you? Like, what do we call this? I'm like, I don't know, but I like it because it shows that there's just so much there, and so much of music, and that's what I'm looking to show.
Yeah, it adds a very sort of exciting and fun element to the show as well, not knowing what the next turn will be, either stylistically or, I thought it was a great pacing of like being introduced to, say an Eastern European folk song, and then sort of getting the dessert of like, oh, something I was already familiar with. So it sort of brings the audience along too. It allows you to expose them to things, but then sort of reward them for going along with you with something they're already familiar with. It's a really good it's a good programming model. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you. that also took some time to figure out exactly how to do that, and how to do that, convincingly. And like you say, not throw too much of something really cool, but something that it's like, whoa, a lot of at one time. And I also never want to forget what I grew up on, some of the first early songs, melodies that I heard. And so it has taken some years, I will say, to put that together into a story of also like where I come from musically, what I've heard in my life from a little girl to maybe yesterday,
Yeah.
So, and the, the elements that it brings to the audience of, whoa, we're not quite sure what's next. I also like to put that in there for myself. I love the element of surprise for myself. Obviously, I'm not surprised at what we're playing with. That's rehearsed, practiced. But so I think that's why I like to put in the improvisation, like, all right, let's take a solo, or maybe I'll yell something, maybe I'll say something, because I'm not shy about that either. It definitely does not need to be this like well-rehearsed silent, no, I have no problem. I'm not sure I did it so much at the Royal Room, but I have been known to just literally like scream out whole sentences because I want us to go here rather than maybe where we rehearse. But I like that too, because it keeps me excited for what's next.
Yeah. Was the violin something? I was trying to do the math while you were speaking before, for how long you were playing up until your conservatory time. But was the violin placed in your hand as a child, or did you choose the violin?
It was placed in my hand as a child. My father could not wait till I turned. I think you had to be like 2 years and 10 months or something. So just about 3, in order to start a string instrument as a Suzuki group lesson student. And he could not wait until whatever the age minimum was. He wanted me to be a musician. He wanted me to play music. He wanted me to go to New England Conservatory. It was very much a plan. And people often ask me, well, he played saxophone, why violin? Yeah. It was simply because you could start it at the youngest possible age. And that's what he wanted me to do. And so it was placed into my hands. And, there's certainly opinions about that type of plan and that type of method, but it was the instrument for me. I can say that there are some other instruments that I'd like to play, and maybe I'll do that at some point. But violin is me. It's my personality, and so good choice.
Yeah. Did you ever rebel against it? Was there a time where you said, "I'm walking away from this," or were you always all in?
There was never a time when I said I'm walking away from this. There were times that I said I'm doing, actually at a young age, at 12, I was actually maybe 11, but I was like, I'm doing this my way. I'm the violinist. This is how I'm going to do this. This is what I want to hear. This is what I want to hear out of myself. And it goes along with also the route I've decided to go, to not do classical music. That was a certain very certain decision that I made, and I didn't want to do that. no one's going to tell me that I can only play this and this is my path. So in that sense, I made my own decisions, and I made it very clear to whoever, teachers, father, coaches, whoever, that this is what I was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And they could accept that or not, but this is what was happening.
Yeah. When a musician references Suzuki, for what should a layperson take away from that meaning? Because it's often said without being explained. What exactly is it?
So it's a method of starting string instruments. I think also piano too, but it's a method of starting playing solely focused on the student beginning to play. So it is it's absolutely an oral method. There's, you don't start reading. It is, they want to immerse you in, you're playing violin. Here's how you hold the instrument. Here's how you do, they will teach certain basics like that. But the whole point of it is to get the student playing as soon as possible. That's what you're there to do. You're there to develop your ability to play by ear, not reading. It's almost like it's centrally focused around ear, your ear training, and ear playing, I should say. And that has some, advantages, disadvantages. I can say for me, I should say too that the method isn't designed to be end all be all. It is to start the student or whoever wants to play playing, because that's the fun part, And so I think it's a great method. People definitely have criticisms of it, and the criticism would be that you're so focused on ear training that your reading and your recognition of the notes suffers a little bit, because it's so dominant on the playing by ear. Some people say that your technique could suffer because you're not focused enough on hand position or this. It really depends on your teacher, obviously, with anything. I do think it is a good method. I think that playing by ear and being able to do that gives you so much security as a musician, that you can fall back on. And when it becomes, it's the way that music was passed on, has always been passed on. And so I like that organic part of it too. I think it sets up a good mindset. It was certainly great for me, because I think that I still go back to the those first developmental years of, I'm playing violin, and I'm using my ear. I see a lot of musicians who are great musicians and they don't trust their ear. You can see them not trusting their ear. They're paralyzed without something to read. And they have the ear, they just don't trust that they have the ear. Yeah. So I think it's a great method. But to answer your question, what it means is that it's an ear playing by ear method.
Yeah. And what's the longest length of time you've worked with any one individual teacher?
Well, so my teacher, the teacher who I would consider my teacher, he has passed away now, but his name was Eric Rosenblith. And I met him when I went back to prep school at New England Conservatory. And then I stayed with him through undergrad and master's. So I was with him for about 10 years, maybe a little over 10, 11 years. And and it's not because he's the last teacher that I had it made the impact. No, he was just an amazing man, amazing player, and really devoted and dedicated to his students, and would individualize everything. And he would look at each student differently. He wouldn't, if we're talking like fingerings, he would say, well, this fingering doesn't work as well for you because your hand isn't as fat and short and fat as mine. So he would take into account just who you were as a person, who your physical, your physical maybe limitations, but your physique, your hand, your everything. And each time it was something new for him. And he loved figuring out how to make you individually the best player that you could be.
Yeah. After that length of time in sort of the student-teacher relationship, do you ever reach the end of the road with a teacher like that? Or like how do, I would imagine, the parity starts to get closer, but what's the relationship look like the deeper you get into it?
I think you become friends by the end. I think that he, for me, became someone that I could call at 11 o'clock at night if I wanted to talk with him about something, not even just musically, ask him something. You become, less teacher student, and he always wanted it to be that way from the beginning anyway. He would always joke that, about certain things that maybe I didn't know or that I obviously didn't have much experience with. He'd say, well, that's okay because you have older friends who know a little bit more about this. And, but he would always consider himself, your friend, and he wanted you to consider him your friend. And I think that it was part of when a teacher agrees or takes on another student, for him, it was, can this person and I be friends? Are we going to be friends? Because then we can work together. Then, we can really make a lot of progress. And as far as like the lessons, I mean, he's a man who you could always learn something from, but it becomes, oh, hey, Marissa, do you, I'm playing this chamber music festival. We need a violinist. Do you want to play with us? So it's now, again, as the friendship gets stronger and he's worked with you or he's worked with me for that amount of time, he knows what I know. He knows what I can handle. Again, this idea of trust. Yeah, come play this festival in Austria with me. Come play this concert. It becomes more like that. I think the teacher will invite you in to then perform with them.
Yeah, yeah. How did you how did you come to the Ian Anderson and Jethro Tull relationship?
So that was that was actually, I have to say, it was all. It was pretty much right place, right time. I was in school. I was doing my undergrad at England Conservatory. Ian Anderson called the gig office that we have there, where I happened to work. It was my little work study job. And I didn't answer the phone at this when he called in. But someone picked up the call. He called the gig office and said, I'm going to be in Boston. I would like to hold auditions for an upcoming tour I have. Any interested people should send their, press kits to such and such. So that's what I did. I was like, well, actually, first I wasn't even interested. I said, well, I go to my mother and I said, Mommy, there's this band that is playing. I mean, it's pretty good money, but I mean, like, do you think like I could, because it was during school and it was during the semester, and I'm thinking my mother's never going to allow me to go tour with some band. She's like, well, what's the name of the band? And I was like, Jethro Tull. And she's like, Jethro Tull? And I'm like, I was like, yeah, who are they?
Pack your bags, girl.
Exactly. She practically like threw me onto the tour bus and she's like, you are auditioning for this. You are taking the tour. So that's how that happened. I went, I auditioned. He really liked me. I think maybe being a little bit naive to the whole scene at the time. I think I was 19, so I was young. And rock wasn't something that I, at the time, had a lot of experience with. So I was just like, well, I'm just going to go in and like play and be loose and free, and hopefully they like me. And so that's how it went. I took an audition, and actually, I think that was probably for like a pop tour or a tour of that caliber. That is the first and last audition I ever took. There are no auditions. It's word of mouth. It's, who recommends you, and I really respect to this day, I really respect how Ian does business. He does it himself. He doesn't have a casting agency. Oh, we want this look. We want that look. No, he's like, who can play and who do I want? And, and so that's what he did. And I wish more things would be that way.
Does he serve as the musical director for the band, or is there a separate sort of MD?
There is a separate MD. And again, it's similar to, I think it's similar to how I've modeled how I try to lead my bands and with my show after him, because he has a separate MD who does all the arrangements, does all the the orchestrations for what the different combinations of ensembles. So he's got a separate person for that. Someone he's handpicked, someone he's tested, someone he's worked with for years, and that is separate. Of course, the songs are his. Of course, he knows what he wants, but that is the writing and the putting down on paper and the different orchestrations is definitely designated to his MD.
Yeah. And, so what was that like coming from the world you were in to that? Was it, I'll stop trying to guess. What was it like?
It was so cool. It was the coolest thing ever. It was exactly what you might think, like in a dream, or these, they dream about like, oh, what's it like to be a rock star? It's everything. It's flashing lights. It's, thousands of fans. It's these huge arenas with, strobe lights and light show and smoke and electric instruments. It's all that. And for me personally, I really tried to be in every moment, every show, every moment, to like remember it all, because it really is such a dream and it's so cool, and you feel so cool. You feel as cool as you think you're gonna feel if you ever get that. If you ever get that opportunity, you're like, yeah, you feel pretty good about yourself. So and it's fun because it's loud, and that you can sometimes you just want to like be loud. Sometimes it's like, coming from classical where you're like, oh, this crescendo and that crescendo, and with pianissimo down to the softest, most delicate sound you can make. And not that there isn't an element of that there in its own way, certainly, but it's like, go ahead and play. It's freeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have to learn anything in your actual technique or delivery to be able to play in that environment? You know, you said things were more electric or more loud, or, you know, what was there an adjustment you had to make, or an adjustment period?
Yeah, there certainly is. For me, I think the biggest adjustment was actually using in-ear monitors. So because on such huge arena stages and even small theaters, the stages are so big that you can't acoustically hear the person next to you, next to you. I wouldn't be able to hear the bass player. I wouldn't be able to, I could probably hear drums, but even that, the sound is bouncing and doing so many things in these huge spaces that you need to be wearing in-ear monitors. And the first time that I use them, it's like I can hear so clearly, but it's like too clearly. And I also feel like I'm underwater. It's like when you can hear your own breath or your own like humming and, in your ears, it's like, I can hear it, but it's not necessarily like helpful. So that was a little bit of an adjustment for me. And it did have me a little, maybe a little unsteady, just like, okay, I'm not quite sure I can hear myself. So that was definitely the hardest thing for me. The other thing, which you might not think about, I certainly did not, was that the motion of the tour bus, when you're on a tour bus through the night, and then you wake up, you get to the venue and you sit in your chair for whatever rehearsal, or you're standing there, and you get this sort of like off balance, dizziness. And that happened to me for about a week or maybe even 2. And I'm standing there, like I'm rocking out. And then all of a sudden I'm like, hold on, wait, I gotta sit down. And even sitting doesn't help. I'm gonna sit on the floor because I almost fell out of my chair at dinner a few times. So, and that was like, oh, when is this gonna wear off? Because I didn't like that. So, those sort of like balance things.
Were you a theatrical or a physical player before your foray into rock and pop? You mentioned earlier in the conversation how you got up in Greg Fulton's face, and I just observed you were very you're an active participant on stage. You're not just standing there, doing the soloist thing or what have you. Is that something? Where did that enter your sort of musical personality?
I think it did start with the Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson experience. I'm trying to think. Before then, I wanted to be more active. I wanted to be, and a criticism of me as growing up, from a little kid, 8, 9, 10, all the way I can remember till I was 15, 16. People would say, you look so stiff, you look so rigid when you're performing or when you're playing. And they're like, you sound great, and there's a ton of emotion in your sound, but how you stand, it's like you're like a statue. So and in the classical context, it's like I would always kind of think to myself, well, yeah, you're dictating exactly what I can do, my dynamics, exactly how everything has to be. You tell me if I do this, no, that's wrong because the composer doesn't want this or that. So it was always kind of funny to me when people would say that. It's like, well, yeah, because you're restricting me to to exactly what's on the page. It's like it's not exactly a relaxed scene there. But when I started playing other types of music, I realized, like I was saying, the dance and the movement that has gone along with it for maybe thousands of years. I felt like drawn to it because I'm like, oh, I can move. In fact, I should move. It would be weird if I didn't, you know. And I think that's what drew me to the music, the element of dance. And then, yes, as far as the presence on stage, I saw what the guys in Jethro Tull did. I saw what people in other bands did. And it's like, yeah, people want to see someone having fun, and you should be having fun if you're enjoying the music you're playing. So that all kind of, because I always wanted that. I always sort of had it in me, but I think with the classical background and maybe some of the teachers I had before my teacher, growing up, I think I was like afraid to move or play a wrong note or play a scratchy note or whatever. So I think that was, again, freeing to know that that option is there.
Yeah. So what's next for you in terms of projects or coming out of the pandemic? Do you get on the road? Do you like what how are you thinking about what's next?
Well, right now, actually, there's been quite a bit of quite a few opportunities for like Broadway or off-Broadway shows for me, which is something I love, absolutely love doing it. I've loved doing it ever since, I would do like the middle school plays and really enjoyed being involved in the theater scene. So that's what's on deck right now. I'm going to be going back to Boston for a few months to do the ART's, American Repertory Theater's production of 1776, a revival of the musical. And so I'm going to be involved with that for a few months through the summer. Doing some shows with the band, with the New York band, similar to the Royal Room. I have two Birdland shows coming up in March, the end of March, March 27th. There are two shows that evening, one at 7 and one at 9:30. And so that's going to be fun. Another similar situation. I've got the core, but we'll be introducing a new singer and a guitarist out of New York who's really great. And we're just going to have some fun doing that. And all these guys are on shows or doing their own projects, and so it's hard to sometimes get everyone together. So when we can, even with the various shutdowns, it's still kind of crazy that people are so unavailable. But yeah, so that's what's on deck for right now. Some musical theater, I think, this is going to be the year for that, and just continue to do some recording, maybe with some other projects as well.
Yeah. Do the musical theater gigs sort of do they make it hard to do other work? Sitting on the outside of that, it looks like they look like they're demanding gigs in terms of the rigidity of the schedule. And, how do you balance the sort of steadiness and the lifestyle plus of a gig like that with sort of wanting to develop your own things? It's absolutely possible. And everyone that I know, especially in the rhythm sections, because, bass players, drummers are so high in demand. And there is a lock-in period for any Broadway or off-Broadway show. Broadway's definitely more, you do have to commit that time. It's about a 2.5 month period where you are rehearsing the show, you're doing tech week with production, and you really have to be there. But outside of that 2.5 months, you're required to play 51% of the total shows for the year, whatever that, it's an 8-show week for Broadway shows. So as long as you make over 51, and you can divide that up however you want. So say if you have a 3-month tour,
you can technically take off 3 months and give it to a substitute. Or several substitutes, and they'll cover your show while you're gone, and then you just come back and sort of make up that time that way. So it's absolutely possible. And I know a ton of people who are off touring, and then they have, they know they have to play like 6 months and 1 day of their show in order to, keep being the chair player for that.
Wow.
That gig. And there are people who leave too, who say, I've loved this show and I'm tired of it and I want to do something else, or I want to sit around and do nothing. There are people who do decide to leave, and that's entirely acceptable as well. And you would, in that situation, just give it to presumably a sub that you've known and trusted and who can handle the show. But
as the chair, are you responsible for sourcing the sub?
You are, in most cases. In New York, yes. Sometimes, there are MDs or people who want to be more involved in who subs, or if they don't want a person subbing. But yeah, it is you recommending and kind of putting those names there. And I can tell you that if you, as a sub, do not do a good job, that is not a good look. If you're just unprepared or you just haven't prepared enough, that won't work out well. But
for anybody.
Yeah. So sometimes the MDs do like to be more involved, just to have someone they know.
Yeah. But the general notion is it's your seat, fill it.
Yep. It's your seat, fill it. And we don't want to know that there's even a different person there. If I weren't looking, or if I happen not to look at your chair, I don't want to know that that's not you. That's
fascinating.
That's kind of the thing. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for spending time to do this today.
Of course.
I really appreciate it. It's great to spend some time talking to you.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we were able to figure everything out.
Yeah. Hopefully
mostly on my end with my computer.
No, I appreciate the diligence. So
Sure.
I hopefully I'll see you in Seattle or maybe back in New York. I'm there with some regularity. But I'll check your calendar when I travel.
Definitely let me know, and let me know when you're in East Coast, and I'm looking forward to hopefully coming back West Coast in the summer.
Wonderful. All right, then I'll plan to see you soon.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much, Marissa Licata. Thank you, Aunt Taylor and the team at Light. And as always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On. Get and share all of our past episodes, write a review, even send us a message through our website, spotlightonpodcast.com. If you like what we're up to here, please leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Join us again next week. In the meantime, be safe and stay in touch.